Waves.com.
The news comes to you with the compliments of Eureka Medical Laboratories. With the news at this time, I am Deanna Jordan. A very good morning to you. To begin the news, here is a look at the lead stories. The Guyana Teachers Union is calling for schools to be closed as teachers and students are being infected with COVID. A house has crushed to death a woman and her daughter while they were feeding puppies. And in regional news, the Bahamas is considering importing nurses as more COVID-infected healthcare workers are off the job. And for the international news, we'll bring you the latest bulletin from the BBC World Service. The details of these and other stories will be coming up right here in just a moment.
Don't let the fear of contracting the coronavirus disease deter you from seeking the medical care you need. At Eureka Labs, we ensure the safety of our clients and staff with our rigid sanitization routine. This involves the use of ultraviolet lights to effectively rid the air and all surfaces of viruses and bacteria that may be present throughout the lab daily. The light works to rapidly inactivate microorganisms through a physical process that is invisible to human eye. So the next time you need a checkup, don't hesitate to give us a call on 225-7574 to schedule your appointment.
And now the news in detail. Shadow Minister of Education, Dr. Nicolette Henry, is cautious about schools remaining open in light of the surge in the number of coronavirus cases. She acknowledges that the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, says that schools should remain open to avoid learning loss. Among the recommendations are the need for consultations among all stakeholders in the education system, physical distancing during school sessions, the promotion of safety and hygiene practices to, from, and at school, as well as equal access for marginalized segments. But at the same time, Dr. Henry, who is a former Minister of Education, says she does not believe that the ministry has put in place all of the measures that UNICEF has recommended at all of the schools.
Yes, UNICEF would have indicated that it would be in the best interest in order to reduce learning loss to have schools reopen, but they did not stop there. They also pointed out that in order for schools to be safe, there are certain measures that must be put in place, which, as far as I'm aware, they have not been put in place. And so I think that there is where we have to disconnect. There is where our concern, particularly at the level of the coalition lines, and I don't think that anybody who is technically competent would advise the Minister of Education to reopen school and not to put those measures in place.
Former Minister of Education, Dr. Nicolette Henry. The opposition, a Partnership for National Unity's parliamentarian, Ganesh Mahipal, also called on the government to say how many students and parents have been infected by COVID so far.
Provide us with the number of teachers that are currently positive and state whether they are isolated at home or elsewhere. We are not asking for people's name, but we need the data. We need the numbers. We want to also know the total number of children that were tested positive, and we want to know what is the transmissibility.
APNU Plus AFC parliamentarian Ganesh Mahipal. The Guyana Teachers Union is calling on the Ministry of Education to order the closure of schools because teachers are being infected with COVID-19. The union says all schools should be closed immediately so that the Ministry of Health can conduct a proper assessment before advising on the way forward. But President Irfan Ali has made it clear that schools will not be closed.
In terms of schools, we have seen all the data so far, and most countries, almost all the countries, are saying we cannot close the schools. We cannot close the education system. They're keeping the schools open. They're doing the testing. They're taking the precautions. They're encouraging the wearing of masks.
The GTU says its figures show that 65 teachers and 44 students have tested positive in 2 days of school. The union also says that 15 schools were forced to close due to COVID-19 cases. However, according to the union, a number of other schools are operating despite reporting issues of COVID-19. The teachers' union says it prefers face-to-face learning rather than online learning, but the rate at which persons are getting sick due to COVID-19 infections has to be addressed now. Minister of Health Dr. Frank Anthony says that with more than 3,000 active COVID cases countrywide, those infected persons are being urged to isolate themselves at home.
All these people who have tested positive, we are asking them to stay in isolation. There are people who have tested positive and sometimes they still walk around the place, which means that they would be in their infectious period and they would be the persons who would be spreading it to others. So if you have been diagnosed as being positive, then you should stay home and be in isolation so as to prevent or reduce the spread of Omicron. If people don't behave responsibly, we are going to see more cases. So I'm asking all these persons, these 3,481 persons that currently have active COVID, that they remain in isolation and follow the protocol that has been established.
The Ministry of Health says there are now 967 new COVID cases, amid informed speculation that the highly contagious Omicron variant is in Guyana. Official statistics also show that 3,374 persons have now been told to isolate themselves at home to prevent the virus from spreading further. Of the 75 persons who are hospitalized, the Health Ministry says that 6 of them are seriously sick and receiving intensive care. The number of COVID deaths dating back to March 2021 is now 1,064. 5 others have been told to quarantine as they await results or are being observed to see if they will develop symptoms. The Ministry of Health says that based on trends and comparisons with other countries in the Caribbean and elsewhere, as well as scientific tests, the Omicron variant is in Guyana. The opposition People's National Congress Reform, PNCR, has a new General Secretary. She is Attorney-at-Law Geeta Chandan Edmond. The PNCR says that its leader, Aubrey Norton, appointed her from January 3rd. The party notes that she is a parliamentarian and that she enjoys the support of the PNCR's membership as she has been elected to its central executive. The PNCR highlights that Chandan Edmond is a lawyer by profession and possesses management skills and good human relation skills that make her suitable to be General Secretary of the PNCR. The PNCR says it has confidence in her abilities and will work with her as she strengthens and reorganizes the administration of the PNCR. A woman and her 6-year-old daughter have died after the house collapsed yesterday afternoon. The incident occurred at about 4 p.m. at Lower Bonasika Creek, Essequibo River. Dead are 35-year-old female farmer Simati Chandra and her 6-year-old daughter Christine Sukdeo. The Guyana Police Force says the mother and her daughter were under their house feeding puppies when the house collapsed. The incident occurred while the woman's husband, Tulsiram Sukdeo, was going to burn bushes on another plot of land 2 lots away. Georgetown Mayor Ubraj Narain says The City Council has approved bylaws to fine people who litter the town. He says Local Government Minister Nigel Darmlal has been asked to approve the bylaws that provide for fines. Mr. Darmlal has refused to respond to questions about whether he will approve the bylaws. Mayor Narain says that the city needs its own bylaws because it is not profitable to enforce the National Environmental Protection Act.
We do not get anything from it, but the mayor's city council resources has to be spent to prepare the cases and so on and go to court. We have to do the patrol, we have to do the policing and everything, and that's why in any city across the world, and let us take it to our neighboring countries, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados, let us look at those countries. This city has a littering bylaws, and we need to enforce such a bylaw independently at the level of the city. So that is what we're calling on the Honorable Minister to approve this littering bylaw as early as possible.
He says if approved by the local government minister, persons can be fined $10,000 for their first offense, $20,000 for the second offense, and $35,000, but not more than $500,000 for their third offense. The bylaws also provide for businesses to be licensed once their garbage storage facilities meet the required standards. And now in regional news. The Bahamas is considering importing nurses as the COVID-19 pandemic continues to sicken healthcare workers. With daily COVID-19 cases in their hundreds and more than 130 healthcare workers out of the public health system, the Consultant Physicians Staff Association, CPSA, is concerned about the situation there. Our News Bahamas' Jasmine Brown reports.
CPSA President Dr. Sabri K. Pinder-Butler says the massive wave of COVID cases is crushing the healthcare system as dozens of doctors have been impacted and hospital wards are being shut down.
We are at the point, despite our best efforts, that this is certainly critical.
Dr. Pinder-Butler speaking to our news team as she took a quick break in the middle of a busy clinic shift to explain the dire circumstances. The CPSA president is one of hundreds of healthcare workers on the front lines of the fight against COVID. 130 of her fellow healthcare workers are out of the system.
When you have to close multiple wards and you're not able to reopen them, whether it's because of staffing challenges or whether it's because of other factors, certainly staffing challenges being the main one. If you have the space, but you still don't have the staff to monitor the patient, still don't have the staff to provide the treatment and care, then that is definitely a critical point.
Health Minister Dr. Michael Darville said the government is seeking to bring an additional 50 nurses from abroad to assist as it tries to get a handle on the COVID-19 pandemic.
We certainly know that we're going to need more help. I know that what I've heard from the Ministry of Health that they're planning to augment staff. We're trying to understand, how that will happen. Who will the staff be? Where will they go? Those sorts of things, and that's physician and nursing staff, because we have not been engaged in those discussions as it relates to how that would work. And I think it's very critical for persons on the ground who are working every day to be involved at that level so that you can help direct, where we may be better to serve our population.
Both Darville and Prime Minister Philip Ray Davis have repeatedly said the government is trying to balance the economy with the COVID-19 situation in the Bahamas. Reporting for our news, I'm Jasmine Brown.
And now in Grenada. Grenada's health and port authorities cancelled 5 cruise ships between December and January due to outbreaks of flu-like symptoms on board. Based on the Grenada cruise ship protocol, cruise lines are mandated to immediately report outbreaks of acute respiratory illness or flu-like illness among passengers or crew members. Also, Port Health Authority and local agents are required to report if there is any COVID-19 positive case. Using these guidelines, the health authorities have cancelled 5 cruise calls from December 29, 2021 to January 7, 2022 to protect Grenada's population. Marketing and Sales Manager of the Grenada Tourism Authority, Nikayan Roberts, says this precautionary process is applied to all cruise calls expected into Grenada until May 2022, when the 2021 to 2022 season ends. Grenada's 2021 to 2022 cruise ship season began in November, and a little more than 200 ships are scheduled to berth at the island's harbour. However, since the discovery of the Omicron variant of COVID-19, several ships have either cancelled schedules to their ports or were turned away because of the COVID-19 outbreak on board. Health Minister Nicholas Steele disclosed on Tuesday during the post-cabinet briefing that there is a health protocol or an agreement with minimum requirements for cruise ships and all other sailing vessels to fulfill for them to be allowed to berth at any of the harbours in the country. He says permission will only be granted to a sailing vessel if less than 1% of the passengers on board are infected with COVID-19 or other infectious diseases. Suriname's Chief of Police, Roberto Prade, will step down later this month to make way for reform of that law enforcement agency. Star News reports that Mr. Prade will leave the job on January 25th. His announcement came after 2 meetings, one with the Minister of Justice and Police, Kenneth Amoxi, and another with President Chandrika Prasad Santokhi. The police chief, says he is giving the government sufficient space to implement the planned reorganization of the Suriname Police Corps. The government says it will work on a management team to lead the force. Shell Trinidad and Tobago's national gas company have signed an agreement for the development of a natural gas project at the concession named Manatee. Details from TTT News Online.
In other news, the National Gas Company has signed a head of agreement with Shell to advance the Manatee gas field project. In a media release, NGC said the agreement starts the pre-front-end engineering design phase for the processing of the Manatee gas via NGC's Beachfield facility. NGC said the agreement sets the frame for technical and commercial work to enable further progress through this phase of the project. NGC President Mark Lokwan believes the signing bodes well for the local energy sector since it points to yet another milestone in meeting the country's future demands for natural gas. He added that this is an important step for the overall Manatee project and assured that the company remains committed to provide a steady and reliable supply of natural gas.
And now for the international news, here's the latest bulletin from the BBC World Service.
Hello, I'm Debbie Russ with the BBC News. President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev of Kazakhstan has said order has been largely restored after days of nationwide anti-government protests. The demonstrations began 6 days ago, sparked by a sudden rise in fuel prices and fed by widespread discontent with the country's authoritarian government. Our correspondent Rehan Dimitri has been following developments.
He said that he gave an order to his security services to open fire without warning against armed rebels. He said there were about 20,000 bandits that were operating in Almaty. The fighting was still ongoing, and he said that they will be destroyed very soon. He expressed his gratitude towards the leaders of the Moscow-led security group, and there were special words of gratitude towards Vladimir Putin for his swift and friendly reaction, as President Tokayev has said.
Dozens of people are reported to have been killed by gunmen in Zamfara state in northwest Nigeria. Villagers have told the BBC that a large group of bandits on motorbikes attacked settlement after settlement on Tuesday and Wednesday, shooting indiscriminately and setting houses on fire. Some sources have put the number of casualties at more than 100. Local media say the gunmen appear to have been fleeing in advance by the Nigerian military. Thousands of troops have been deployed to combat the armed gangs, which the government has declared to be terrorist groups. The Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Sen has arrived in Myanmar as chair of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. His visit has angered those supporting the parallel National Unity Government, representing the ousted administration. Jonathan Head reports.
Last year, frustrated by the Myanmar junta's brutal campaign against its opponents, ASEAN barred its leaders from its summit meetings, an unprecedented sanction against a member state. However, Hun Sen believes that ASEAN must engage with the Burmese generals in order to ease a conflict which has cost around 1,500 lives and devastated the economy. Armed resistance to the junta is continuing in many areas of Myanmar, and the military has responded with scorched earth tactics, destroying villages and driving tens of thousands from their homes.
Japan has agreed to pay more to host American soldiers on its soil amid increasing concerns over security threats posed by China and North Korea. 50,000 US troops will stay in Japan for another 5 years, with Tokyo paying $1.8 billion per year to maintain the agreement. State media in China say many people have been injured in an explosion at a local government canteen in Wulong, the Chongqing municipality of southwestern China. 9 have been rescued, but an unknown number remain trapped. World News from the BBC. The French Foreign Minister has said Saudi Arabia and the organisers of the Dakar rally must be very transparent about what may have been a terrorist attack just before it started. Jean-Yves Le Drian said the government had considered abandoning the rally after a French driver was badly injured when his car exploded near Jeddah last week. The Dakar rally has been held in Saudi Arabia since 2020. Police in the Indian city of Amritsar are searching for 13 charter flight passengers who fled institutional quarantine after testing positive for coronavirus. A local official told the BBC 9 of them escaped from the airport and 4 ran away from a local hospital. There's been a sharp jump in coronavirus infections in India in the last week. The authorities in the Indian state of Bihar are investigating how one local man received 8 doses of coronavirus vaccine last year. Ramdea Mundal, a retired postman, said the jabs had helped him get rid of aches and pains, adding he hadn't suffered any ill effects. Health officials say they're flummoxed at how Mr Mandel managed to get 8 jabs at 4 different locations. The Australian authorities have said 2 other tennis players or officials are being investigated for possible breaches of the country's COVID vaccination rules following the decision to deny Novak Djokovic entry on Wednesday. Shaima Khalil reports.
It's unclear if the world number 1 will remain in the immigration detention hotel where he spent last night. Yesterday, Djokovic's mother, Diana, said her son was being kept like a prisoner. But the Australian Home Affairs Minister, Karen Andrews, said there was nothing stopping the tennis star from leaving the country if he chose not to pursue the case. Novak Djokovic has previously made clear his opposition to getting the vaccine. He came to the country with an exemption granted by Tennis Australia and the state of Victoria.
That's the latest BBC News.
The news came to you with the compliments of Eureka Medical Laboratories.
A COVID-19 PCR test is now mandatory for many routine activities, including travel and return to work purposes. At Eureka, our trained and experienced staff will ensure confidentiality while your test is conducted in a professional and timely manner, with results in just 48 hours. So the next time you require an efficient and hassle-free PCR COVID-19 test, call 624-8378, 608-8378, or 623-7233 to schedule your appointment. You can also ask about our house call testing service.
And now to end the news, here's a recap of the leads. The Guyana Teachers Union is calling for schools to be closed as teachers and students are being infected by COVID. A house has crushed to death a woman and her daughter while they were feeding puppies. And in regional news, the Bahamas is considering importing nurses as more COVID-infected healthcare workers are off the job. And that's the end of the news.
This has been the news, compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/demwaves.